Hello. In this video we're going to look at adding and subtracting fractions. So this example that we have here, we've got the fraction x plus 1 all over x squared minus x minus 6 minus the fraction x plus 2 all over x squared minus 7x plus 12. Anytime you're adding and subtracting fractions, the first thing you always have to do is get a common denominator. Now we could just multiply both sides, both fractions, by the other's denominator, and that would give us a common denominator, but it wouldn't always give us the least common denominator. In order to find the least common denominator, we need to first factor our denominators. So our first denominator, x squared minus x minus 6, that'll factor. Factors of negative 6 that add to negative 1 are going to be x minus 3, x plus 2, and then x squared minus 7x plus 12. That second denominator is going to factor. Factors of 12 that add to negative 7 are going to be 3 and 4, x minus 3, x minus 4. And then we need to identify the least common denominator. I'm not able to spell right now. So our least common denominator is going to be the biggest power that we see on any of our factors. So our least common denominator here, well, what I do is I just write down my first denominator. So we've got x minus 3 and x plus 2. Both of those are raised to the first power, so our least common denominator so far just has those to the first power. If you had one that was squared, you would square it. Now we're going to look at our second denominator. Now I've already got my x minus 3 to the first power, so I don't need to add anything else, but I do have an x minus 4 that is not included in that first denominator. So our least common denominator for this problem will be x minus 3 times x plus 2 times x minus 4. Now we need to build those fractions up to that least common denominator. So we want our least common denominator to be in the fraction on both of those fractions. Now our first fraction, the denominator was x minus 3x plus 2. That gives us our first one, but we need to include that x minus 4 on our numerator, because we multiplied it in our denominator, we need to also multiply it in the numerator, and then we still have the x plus 1 that came from our original numerator. All right, for our second fraction, we've got the x minus 3 and the x minus 4, but it doesn't have this x plus 2, so we need to make sure and multiply the top by that x plus 2 because it wasn't originally there. We also have x plus 2 from our original numerator. So the x plus 1 and the x plus 2 that were originally in our numerator, and then the part that is missing from our LCD needs to be multiplied. All right, now once we have that least common denominator, we can add or subtract. In this case, we're subtracting our numerators. And we're going to keep the LCD as our denominator. So we have x plus 1 times x minus 4 minus x plus 2. I'm going to go ahead and write that as x plus 2 squared. You could leave it as x plus 2, it does not matter. And then our denominator is that least common denominator. And then now all we need to do is simplify it. We need to go ahead and expand and combine like terms in the numerator. So I'm going to multiply those out. X plus 1 times x minus 4 is going to give us x squared minus 4x plus x minus 4 minus x plus 2 quantity squared. We want to make sure and subtract that whole thing, so I do want to make sure that I'm distributing my negative once I square that, because remember, order of operations, we have to do the exponent before we can multiply by the -1 out front here. So I do want to put parentheses around that. X squared plus 2 times x times 2 will give us 4x plus 2 squared is 4, all over that common denominator. Don't lose your denominator. And we need to distribute the negative. I'm going to go ahead and combine like terms while I'm distributing the negative. So we've got negative 4x plus x is going to give us a negative 3x. Still have that x squared and that minus 4. Distribute that negative, we get minus x squared minus 4x minus 4, all over that common denominator. And then when we combine like terms, x squared and negative x squared are going to add to 0 for our x squareds. Negative 3x plus or minus 4x is going to give us negative 7x. And then minus 4 is going to be minus 8 over that common denominator. And then we want to make sure that this fraction will not reduce any further. Make sure that we can't factor anything out of the numerator. We could factor a negative out, so if we wanted to, we could write this as negative x plus 8 all over that denominator, but 7x plus 8. But we that doesn't really benefit a whole lot. If you do factor out this negative, make sure that that negative is out front in the fraction and not just on the negative or just on the 7. If you factor it out, either use parentheses around your numerator or make it clear that it's out front. But this one we can't reduce any further, and so we're done there.